All right, welcome back, everybody. We are answering your questions today. My colleague Shannon Vasconcelos and I are. Shannon, you have a question for me.
I sure do. This question comes in from Ming, and Ming asks, my daughter is really busy this July with an internship. We have a family vacation planned after that, and I'd like her to have some downtime in August before school starts. Lots of her friends are visiting colleges, but we're going to do that after she finds out where she gets accepted. Is there any reason not to do that? My guess is yes, but tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah, no, I would say yes. I would say that the only reason not to visit colleges would be if you truly can't afford to visit colleges. And by that, I don't mean that you need to visit every single school that your student's going to apply to, but there really is no substitute for setting foot on a campus. And while there were a lot of substitutes for that during COVID, especially, where a lot of schools were doing remote, sort of live guided tours that you could follow along via Zoom and things like that. And that was great. But the amount of uncertainty that students had when it came time to actually make a choice during the last 2 years was really, it was very, very difficult. And we're seeing students a lot more interest in transferring, and there are a lot of variables impacting that. And I'm not going to say the choice, or they really didn't have a choice, but the inability to visit a college before they'd been admitted, and in some cases before they actually accepted the offer, is only one of those. But it's such an important piece if you're going to commit 4 years, possibly more, of your life. And as a parent, if you're going to commit your very hard-earned money to spending on this experience, you really want to make sure that this is an environment where you're going to be happy. And there's only so much you can see from afar. So at the very least, you certainly should be visiting the schools that are relatively close to you, within driving distance. I do understand the desire to have some downtime in August, but at the same time, visiting colleges should be kind of fun, right? You're thinking and dreaming about what's coming up ahead and where you might spend the next 4 to 5 to 6 years of your life. And I would just really encourage carving out time for that. These visits certainly can be done on the weekends in the fall, so there's generally a fair number of opportunities to do visits. They don't all have to happen in the summer, but I absolutely am not supportive of the idea that you just wait until the student finds out where they've gotten in and then go and visit. Because what happens if your student applies to 8 schools, gets into 6, and you go and visit 6 schools and your student doesn't really like any of them? Mm-hmm. And it's very possible, because also, if you haven't visited a college, you might think that certain things are really important to you that ultimately, after you visit, you realize, oh, I don't actually care about that at all. It's this that's the most important thing to me. So as an example, I would say that sometimes you have a student who says, I really need to be in college in the city. In the city is where I am. And then they go and they visit a school that's in the suburbs, and they visit 2 schools in the city, and they realize, wow, I love this one school in the city and this other school in the suburbs, and I don't like this other school in the city. Because at the end of the day, where the college was in terms of, actually being in an urban center was less important than the fact that the 2 schools the student really liked had an academic program that was particularly compelling to them, or had the way that the campus was set up made it feel more like home. So there are so many variables, even among schools that seem like they're alike. And then also there are so many things that can change after a student visits a college. So I'm really going to put my strong plug in here to visit at least some of the colleges the student's going to apply to. So you have some perspective, or your student has some perspective on what they truly like and what is actually less important at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think sometimes students, and we all do this about things we don't know, if you've never gone to college, they will sometimes get like a romanticized notion in their head of the type of school that they want to attend. Maybe it is the school in the city, or maybe it's a rural school, that's the big thing in town, or maybe it's a big school, or maybe it's a small school. They get an idea in their head that they haven't experienced, and maybe if they thought they wanted that city school, they set foot on a city campus, they may say, "Oh, this is not what I was
Right.
expecting." And if that's
Absolutely.
what was driving your search all along, then you're in trouble.
Right. Well, exactly. So let's say you have a student who's really interested in city or thinks they're really interested in the city. So their whole list is it's BU, it's NYU, it's GW, it's University of New Orleans. It's just a number of schools, all of them in individual cities. You never see one, and then you go to BU and you realize, oh my goodness, there's really like not a I mean, there's a campus here, but kind of not. And this isn't what I imagined for my college.
Mhm.
I imagined a big green campus just plopped in the middle of the city.
Right.
So I could leave and go and do those things I like to do in the city. And that's not what it is at all. So to your point, you have a list of 8 schools that you've applied to. They all fit that bill. Now you don't like that. Now what are you going to do?
Right.
So in case I'm not being clear, please don't do that. Please visit some colleges. And I see that we're getting some pushback in our conversation sometimes with families about this and just not understanding. And the last thing I'll say on this, and because I do want to get to at least one of the other questions that we have, is that at many schools these days, they are tracking demonstrated interest. And while there are many ways for them to track demonstrated interest, the holy grail is visiting. So there is no greater predictor of a student actually attending your school than if they have taken the time to visit. Now, not every school is tracking that. And unfortunately, for all of our listeners out there who are aspiring to the most selective schools in the country, those are the schools least likely to care if you actually set foot on campus. But there are plenty of schools who are. And so if for no other reason than that it's a top choice of your child's and they want to make sure they're doing their best possible job to get in, then you want to visit because that's something that's going to matter.
Right. And just, I know we want to move on, but the
Right.
finance expert in me sort of needs to say, and you did reference this at the beginning, if you cannot afford to visit, I have complete sympathy with that. And there are ways to try to get a feel for a campus without visiting. But I think they're a substitute if they need to be. And maybe you can only afford one trip. Maybe you do wait to see where they're accepted. But there are great, campus tours and things online that you can do if you need to. But if you can afford to swing the visit, I think I agree with you that try to make that happen.
Right, absolutely. And I think based on what Ming is describing, my guess is that it's not the finances so much as the perception that there isn't the time. And I would argue that there is nothing more important for your daughter to spend her time on than at least a handful of visits. So,
agreed.
All right, Shannon, I have another question for you that feels unfortunately very timely. This comes to us from Terry. Terry says, my son is already committed to his college for the fall, but since receiving his financial aid offer, our savings has taken a significant hit with the drops in the stock market. Is it too late to ask for more financial aid?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are feeling this and may have this question. And I would say it's not too late. You can go back to a financial aid office at any point as your circumstances change and ask for more financial aid. Ask them to reconsider your financial aid package. My concern with this question is that even though it is not too late, the concern is sort of too universal. Stock market has gone down essentially across the board. Anyone with any money in the stock market has lost money, give or take.
Yeah.
So, if they increased your financial aid for this reason, they would have to increase kind of everybody's for the same reason. And the school likely cannot afford to do that. The school likely lost money in the stock market too. It is in less of a position to help out. So I would say it's not too late, and there's really no reason not to ask. I always say, ask. The worst they'll say is no. And you never know. Maybe they did find this new scholarship fund that you meet the very specific criteria for, and maybe they can throw a little bit of money your way. But I would say that is an unlikely outcome. The most likely outcome is they'll say, no, sorry, we don't have any more money to give at the moment, unless there's some particular individual circumstances that are unique to you that you can bring up, like your company just had a round of layoffs and you lost your job. That is very specific to you and not everybody,
Right.
not every student at that school. Absolutely let them know that. A hurricane came and blew the roof off your house and you had to replace your roof. Let them know about that. Those are more specific individual circumstances that they may be willing to take under consideration for an individual. These more kind of universal circumstances that we have all experienced, they're much less likely to be able to work with that. They look at your finances at one point in time, that day that you fill out the financial aid application, and they simply cannot, track, oh, the stock market went up one day, so
Right.
let's take away the aid. You wouldn't want them to do that. They have the same theory about when the stock market goes down. So I would say, if you are in a worse position, like a lot of us are today, you thought you could easily swing college, and now today maybe you can't. Think about other ways of funding. Think about, can you use your cash flow, your paycheck on a monthly basis, devote some of that to a monthly payment plan to the school. Think about, do you need to borrow in the short term, and maybe things turn around and you can pay back those loans. There are some short-term stop gaps that you can use, perhaps while the market is down, that can help you meet that college bill.
Awesome. Shannon, thank you so much. And as always, thanks for joining and having this conversation around the questions that our listeners have. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
All right. And I'm going to put in one more plea to please review us on Apple Podcasts. We really would appreciate that. Also, to submit us questions to us, right? Follow us on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Those are all great venues where you can submit questions, and we'll do our best to get them onto the podcast and answer them live for you. Next week, Ian is our host. He is talking to students maybe who want to be sportscasters. We have someone in that field going to talk to us about the things that he did to get to where he is, what athletes who are hoping to be recruited should be doing now, and then also sharing financial aid package information with others, how to do that, when to do that, when not to do that. So we're going to be talking about that. And then finally, we are here every Thursday, and for whatever reason, I can never get it in my head exactly when we are here, but we're every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific. That's it. Bye, everybody.